You're listening to The Philosopher's Note on Pathways to Bliss. More wisdom in less time.
Hi, this is Brian. Welcome to The Philosopher's Notes on Pathways to Bliss, Mythology and Personal Transformation by Joseph Campbell. As always, we'll start with a quote. There are something like 18 billion cells in the brain alone. There are no two brains alike. There are no two hands alike. There are no two human beings alike. You can take your instructions and your guidance from others, but you must find your own path. End quote. That's Joseph Campbell from Pathways to Bliss. This is the third note I've created on Joseph Campbell. As I mentioned in the others, see the notes on A Joseph Campbell Companion and The Power of Myth, Campbell sits in the granddaddy slot in my spiritual family tree. I heart Grandpa Joe. This book is from the Collected Works series New World Library and the Joseph Campbell Foundation are assembling. The prose and the presentation are stunningly beautiful. If you haven't explored Campbell and his hero's journey yet, get on it. And I trust you'll enjoy my notes on this gem, Pathways to Bliss, which provides some big ideas on applying the power of myth to transforming our modern lives. Great stuff. The first big idea is bliss equals the transcendent wisdom within you. Quote, your bliss can guide you to that transcendent mystery, because bliss is the welling up of the energy of the transcendent wisdom within you. So when the bliss cuts off, you know that you've cut off the welling up. Try to find it again. End quote. That's beautiful. Bliss is the welling up of the energy of the transcendent wisdom within you. As I mentioned in the other notes, Campbell initially arrived at his sense we should follow our bliss when studying the ancient Upanishads, the Cortex of Hinduism. The classic Sanskrit scriptures tell us there are three jumping off points to enlightenment: Sat, beingness; Chit, consciousness; and Ananda, bliss. Campbell says he wasn't sure what his proper beingness looks like, and same with his consciousness. But his bliss, he knew what that felt like, and figured if that was one of the three pathways to enlightenment, he'd follow it. And he likes to say, it seems to have worked out pretty well. So, know that there's an incredibly transcendent wisdom within you, and it wells up through your bliss. Meaning, when you feel joy, bliss, rapture, it's because God is flowing through you. And, well, that's a good thing. Alternatively, when you don't feel that bliss, that's a sure sign you've disconnected from your source. Then what? Then it's time to find it again. How? Follow your bliss. Think the thoughts, do the things, and be around the people who help you feel radiantly alive. Abraham Hicks says that we have an emotional guidance system that tells us whether or not we're connected to source. We feel great when we're plugged in, not so great when we're not. The trick is simply to check into how you're feeling. Know that your emotions are an amazing tool to help you tune in, and then choose the better feeling thoughts, and then take inspired action in your life. It's a fun process. Try it out, and check out my notes on Abraham Hicks if that's resonating with you. Next big idea is your life as composed by a novelist. In a wonderful essay called On an Apparent Intention in the Fate of the Individual, Schopenhauer points out that once you have reached an advanced age, as I have, as you look back over your life, it can seem to have had a plot, as though composed by a novelist. Events that seemed entirely accidental or incidental turn out to have been central to the composition. Another astonishing way to look back is to pick up some diary entries or notes that you kept a long time ago. You'll be astonished. Things you were convinced you had realized more recently will all be pinned down there. These are the driving themes of your life. End quote. Reminds me of Emerson. He says, quote, the voyage of the best ship is a zigzag line of 100 tacks. See the line from a sufficient distance, and it straightens itself to the average tendency. And he reminds us that the years teach us much the days never knew. Isn't it amazing how when we look back on our lives, we can see a beautiful set of themes in a remarkably coherent storyline that looks like it was composed by a novelist? So what are your big themes? As you explore your memories and your diaries, what ideas do you come back to again and again and again? Can you see the bliss these ideas bring into your life? Can you structure your life so you're more consistently swimming in them? And speaking of novelists and life scripts and all that jazz, don't forget that the word authentic and author come from the same root. So if you want an authentic life, you've got to be your own author. Get on that masterpiece that is your life, will ya? I'm giddy to see the next chapter. And all this reminds me of a story my friend Trip Lanier shared during one of our chats on his show, The New Man. It's a great show. He says we should imagine our life as a novel and ask ourselves, would I really want to keep reading this book? Or is it way too boring to even want to go to the next chapter? That's funny. Check in on that. That's an awesome standard to know whether we're rocking it or not, huh? All right, the next big idea is life is calling. When the call isn't answered, you experience a kind of drying up and a sense of life lost, end quote. Life is calling. Are you answering? If not, beware. No matter how much you try to numb yourself, the pain's not going away. Not till you step up and answer the call. Then God's on the line and flowing through you. Enter bliss, enthusiasm, all the things you want, but are afraid you may not get, so you keep on doing the same old, same old. Imagine a phone ringing right now. Ring, 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 ring. Don't let it keep on ringing. Pick up. That's God calling. That's life calling. Answer the call. The next big idea is say yes, please. Quote, since all is Brahman, since all is the divine radiance, how can we say no to anything? How can we say no to ignorance? How can we say no to brutality? How can we say no to anything? To this, he said, for you and me, we say yes. End quote. Are you saying yes to it all? Pay attention. I talk about this in the other notes on Campbell as well. For now, ask yourself, am I saying no to life? Or am I saying yes to all of it? The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. Embrace it all. Say yes, please. The next big idea is bringing the boon back. Quote, the whole idea is that you've got to bring out again that which you went to recover, the unrealized, unutilized potential in yourself. The whole point of this journey is the reintroduction of this potential into the world. That is to say, to you living in the world. You are to bring this treasure of understanding back and integrate it in a rational life. It goes without saying this is very difficult. Bringing the boon back can be even more difficult than going down into your own depths in the first place. End quote. First things first, boon. What a sweet word, defined as a thing that is helpful or beneficial, as in the navigation system will be a boon to both civilian and military users. Boon. All right, now that we've got that squared away, so the hero goes on his or her journey. For what? To discover and recover the unrealized, unutilized potential in his self, or yourself, herself, whatever the case may be. Then what? Then we return with the boon. And that process of returning can be even more difficult than the first part of the journey. As Emerson says, it is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. Love that. So you might have noticed that it's kind of challenging to really give your highest self to the world, huh? So even after all this work, all this heroic growth, all this discovery and recovery of our latent potentials, it's still hard to come back to the world and get our shine on. Yeah, well, welcome to the hero's journey. And let's not forget that it's the return that's the most essential part of our trip. So where are you on your journey? Do you need to head out or do you need to return? Fun question to ask. And don't forget, life is really one beautiful journey and return after another. So don't get too comfy and or too stressed, of course, with wherever you're at. Here's to the hero's journey and remembering to bring the boon back. The next big idea, your spiritual practice, I underline books. Quote, for myself, well, Alan Watts once asked me what spiritual practice I followed. I told him, I underline books. It's all in how you approach it. End quote. That is classic. Campbell spent 5 years during the Depression reading, and reading. I love it. His spiritual practice is underlining books. It's all in how you do it. What's your spiritual practice? The next big idea, the simple tasks of life. Quote, but the simple tasks of our life, when you're doing them because they're a function or factor in the life that you love and have chosen and have given yourself, then they don't weigh you down. End quote. Reminds me of George Leonard's wisdom from his fantastic book, Mastery. See the notes on that. He says, could all of us reclaim lost hours of our lives by making everything, the commonplace along with the extraordinary, a part of our practice? Campbell says this in a conversation with a woman talking about doing the dishes and how that ties into the hero journey. He says, quote, you bet your life, all life has drudgery in it. In Zen, however, even while you're washing the dishes, that's a meditation. That's an act of life. It's not a chore, and it's not what you've just been calling it. Sometimes the drudgery itself can become part of the hero deed. The point is not to get stuck in the drudgery, but to use it to free you. End quote. Are you weighed down by the simple tasks in your life? Whether it's doing the dishes or changing the diapers or any of the 1,000,001 mundane tasks that are part of our lives, we always have a choice about how we engage in them. They can weigh us down or elevate our souls. What's your choice? Leads us to the next big idea, balancing cosmic power plus your personality. Quote, there is a story, you may have heard me tell it before, of a samurai. His overlord had been killed, and his vow was, of course, absolute loyalty to his lord. And it was his duty now to kill the killer. Well, after considerable difficulties, he finally backs this fellow in a corner, and he is about to slay him with his katana, his sword, which is the symbol of his honor. And the chap in the corner is angry and terrified, and he spits on the samurai, who sheaths his sword and walks away. Now, why did he do that? He did that because this action made him angry, and it would have been a personal act to have killed that man in anger, and that would have destroyed the whole event. It is very much like this hunting act of the pygmy. This is mythological attitude. You are acting not in terms of your individual personal life, but with the sense of yourself as the priest, so to say, of a cosmic power which is operating through you, which we all are in circumstances, and the problem is to balance yourself against that and have a personality at the same time. End quote. First, cool story about the samurai, huh? To the extent he was impersonally fulfilling his vow, he's all good. The moment it became personal, time to sheath the sword. Powerful. And then this quote gets a big wow. Quote, the problem is to balance yourself against that cosmic power which is operating through you and have a personality at the same time. End quote. I think this is definitely one of, if not the biggest challenges we face in our spiritual evolution. How do we align with the divine and allow our personal essence to shine through? There's all this talk about annihilating the ego. It always makes me wince. Why do we want to do that? Part of a whole nother conversation, but even the word ego rubs me the wrong way. 99% of the people who throw it around can't even tell you what it is. And then even the ones who do know what they mean when they say it, use it in a totally different way, depending on whether their orientation is from the West or the East. In the West, your ego is an important aspect of who you are. The part of you that balances your desires, or id, and your conditioning from the world, superego. In this worldview, we want to develop a healthy ego. In fact, it's essential to proper functioning. Then we head east, and all of a sudden, we've got a totally different take. Campbell says this, quote, of course, to reach the transpersonal, you have to go through the personal. You have to have both qualities there. Ken Wilber did the job for me on this one. You can see the notes on him. He says this, quote, but egoless does not mean less than personal. It means more than personal. Not personal minus, but personal plus. All the normal qualities plus some transpersonal ones. Think of the great yogis, saints, and sages. From Moses to Christ to Padmasambhava. They were not feeble-mannered milquetoast, but fierce movers and shakers, from bullwhips in the temple to subduing entire countries. They rattled the world on its own terms, not in some pie-in-the-sky piety. Many of them instigated massive social revolutions that have continued for thousands of years. And they did so, not because they avoided the physical, emotional, and mental dimensions of humanness in the ego that is their vehicle, but because they engaged them with the drive and intensity that shook the world to its very foundations. The great yogis, saints, and sages accomplished so much precisely because they were not timid little toadies, but great big egos, plugged into the dynamic ground and goal of the cosmos itself, plugged into their own higher self, alive to the pure Atman, the pure I, that is one with Brahman. They opened their mouths and the world trembled, fell to its knees, and confronted its radiant God. There is certainly a type of truth to the notion of transcending ego. It doesn't mean destroy the ego, it means plug it into something bigger. Put bluntly, the ego is not an obstruction to spirit, but a radiant manifestation of spirit. The integral sage, the non-dual sage, is here to show us otherwise. Known generally as tantric, these sages insist on transcending life by living it. They insist on finding release by engagement, finding nirvana in the midst of samsara, finding total liberation by complete immersion. That's from One Taste, which is an awesome book by Ken Wilber. It's from November 17th. It's basically a book of his diary entries. One Taste, November 17th. And right now I'd like to cue some Alleluia music because that passage for me captures the idea of our relationship between ego and spirit. Put bluntly, the ego is not an obstruction to spirit, Ken says, but a radiant manifestation of spirit. Beautiful. Back to Campbell. He says, quote, "You are acting not in terms of your individual personal life, but with the sense of yourself as the priest, so to say, of a cosmic power, which is operating through you, which we all are in circumstances, and the problem is to balance yourself against that and have a personality at the same time." So back to you. How are you showing up? How's the balancing of your personality and your role as priest of the cosmic power working out? Too much of your personality without the plug into source, or too little of your personality, in which case it doesn't matter how plugged in you think you are because you've lost your power. As per Wilbur, I say we plug into source and then let our radiant manifestation of spirit shine. The next big idea is, do I dare? Quote, "The hero journey is one of the universal patterns through which that radiance shows brightly. What I think is that a good life is one hero journey after another, over and over again. You are called to the realm of adventure. You are called to new horizons. Each time there is the same problem. Do I dare? And then if you do dare, the dangers are there, and the help also in the fulfillment or the fiasco. There's always the possibility of a fiasco, but there's also the possibility of bliss." End quote. That gives me a big smile, and I love the fact that there's always the possibility of fiasco. It wouldn't be fun if the outcome was totally guaranteed, huh? And of course, when we really see the rhythms of life, we transcend our fears and laugh a little more throughout the whole process. So here's to a life of one hero journey after another, after another, after another. And the question is, do you dare? And finally, the last big idea, questing for it is not an ego trip. Quote, "What is it we are questing for? It is the fulfillment of that which is potential in each of us. Questing for it is not an ego trip. It is an adventure to bring into fulfillment your gift to the world, which is yourself. There's nothing you can do that's more important than being fulfilled. You become a sign, you become a signal, transparent to transcendence. In this way, you will find, live, and become a realization of your own personal myth." End quote. Beautiful. That's the theme of the book. Let go of your fears that following your quest is an ego trip, and let's become transparent to transcendence. And don't forget the Boon. All right, that's a quick look at this phenomenal book, Pathways to Bliss. Let's look at a little bit more on Joseph Campbell, a few other notes I think you'll enjoy if you like this one, and then some of the quotes from the sidebar. So Pathways to Bliss is by Joseph Campbell. who was born in 1904 and died in 1987, was an American mythology professor, writer, and orator, best known for his work in the fields of comparative mythology and comparative religion. That's from Wikipedia. Read his stuff. He rocks. And you can learn more about him at his foundation, jcf.org. And if you liked this note, I think you'll also like the notes on a Joseph Campbell companion, The Power of Myth, Mastery, Ken Wilber, and the notes on Ask and It Is Given. Now I will share some quotes from the sidebar. These are all Joseph Campbell. This gets back to Krishna's dictum. The best way to help mankind is through the perfection of yourself. How are you going to change the situation unless you break the rules? We hear so much talk now, particularly from the Orient, about egolessness. You are trying to smash this thing, which is the only thing that keeps you in play. There's got to be somebody up there. Otherwise, you're not oriented to anything. The self, that's the great circle, the ship. The ego is the little captain on the bridge. What Jung says is that you should play your role knowing that it's not you. It's a quite different point of view. This requires individuation, separating your ego, your image of yourself, from the social role. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't play the role. It simply means that no matter what you choose to do in life, whether it's to cop out or to cop in, you are playing a role. And don't take it too damn seriously. The persona is merely the mask you're wearing for the game. Now, that's the big thing, to activate your imagination somehow. You can't do this by taking suggestions from somebody else. Eternity is not future or past. Eternity is a dimension of now. What did I do? I read. I followed the path from one book to another, from one thinker to another. I followed my bliss, though I didn't know that that was what I was doing at the time. Consequently, that which religious people call conscience is a social structure that functions as part of the moral system of the culture in which the child is born. The scientist knows that at any moment facts may be found that make the present theory obsolete. This is happening now constantly. It's amusing. In a religious tradition, the older the doctrine, the truer it is held to be. The basic story of the hero journey involves giving up where you are, going into the realm of adventure, coming to some kind of symbolically rendered realization, and then returning to the field of normal life. In the West, you have the liberty and the obligation of finding out what your destiny is. You can discover it for yourself. But do you? And finally, the individual must learn to live by his or her own myth. Well, there you go. That is a quick look at Pathways to Bliss, Mythology and Personal Transformation by Joseph Campbell. Hope you enjoyed. As you can tell, I love Campbell. And here is to your hero journey. Have an awesome day. Look forward to sharing more with you soon. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this Philosopher's Note. Please go to www.philosophersnotes.com to download more.